Welcome to Keep What You Earn, a show for entrepreneurs and business owners who want to scale and build enterprise value without making costly mistakes. I'm your host, Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CFO and CPA who left a career serving Fortune 50 companies in Wall Street to help business owners just like you make life-changing wealth with your business. These episodes are meant to be super tactical and actionable, but please remember, consult your own financial professional before you implement anything you learn in this podcast. Now, if you'd be interested in working with us to do so, check out the show notes for more information about our company, Keep What You Earn Co. All right, let's start the show. Over the last several years, as a CFO and someone who serves business owners, there's a pattern that emerges when a business reaches about that $5 million revenue point. And it's not exact, but roughly in that range, I see a very similar struggle take place, almost like a shedding of the skin that has to happen. And a lot of business owners don't recognize it. And I call it the $5 million bottleneck because there is sort of this thing holding you back from expanding beyond that point. If that is your desire, there are some key things that I see in the form of pattern that got you to where you are, but will not get you to the 7 to 10 million and beyond, right? So breaking out of that 5 million, for you, it could be maybe 3 million, right around that range, it gets really difficult if you encounter this sort of bottleneck. And specifically how it shows up in the form of a symptom is when the founder or the president or the CEO, whatever title it is, the owner is still heavily involved in most key business decisions in various facets of the company. So if your, owner, the person at the top, the person in charge, is still making micro decisions, if they are getting involved in the sales process, if they're getting involved in the marketing, getting involved in finance, getting involved in delivery, whatever it is, and involved to the point where it's beyond an executive update, and they're involved to the level of making key decisions in the micro, meeting with teams weekly, and having to huddle constantly, this is a really big issue. And I find that when you're in that revenue range, you should be able to afford and should be able to provide the infrastructure for the support needed to enable leadership, or at least middle management, to take over some of those decisions for you. What this does is it creates too many direct reports under the owner, and the team lacks a clear structure. So basically, everyone is a direct line to the founder. Now, this is how I feel right now in my business, but I'm also not at this level just yet. But I do see it coming down the pipeline because I know that if I don't make decisions right now when I'm in my early 7-figure stage, then when I try to cross that $5 million threshold, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I've seen it work. I've seen it not work. I'm telling you, this is the number one thing that when unlocked will enable you to grow or not. And I've just seen so many struggles with the firefighting that takes place when you're firefighting instead of thinking about strategic focus. It's the classic in the business, not on the business struggle, but to the nth degree because you are now in a cycle where you're constantly having to put out these fires, constantly having to, cover for things, constantly chasing, that neutral, feeling like you have your shit together, feeling like you have everything under control. And you won't feel that way unless you start trusting other people to take it on for you. And, if you haven't developed the systems and processes, this is key because those systems and processes won't be able to keep up with your growth. If you're growing, but you're not taking a beat to be like, hey, we got to write this down. We got to come up with a precedent. We got to come up with a universal approach. And the most important part, actually following through with that consistent approach. I've seen it countless times where there's an approach that's decided in the here and now, circumstantially. In every single instance of a deviation from the expected process, the entire management team gets on the phone and has to decide every little detour we're going to take and every little decision we're going to make in that moment. And those decisions and those approaches become fleeting where we're choosing option A today, but option B tomorrow. It's detrimental to your culture, number one, because that confuses people and it doesn't enable them to succeed. Number two is that it's also a risk-bearing exercise because You're increasing risk to your company if you are taking a different path every time you make a core decision. Let's say it's about someone's compensation, or it's about someone's schedule, or about a core company policy, something like that. Those people issues are very risky. And you have to be very careful with what precedents you set, especially because people talk to each other. So as you grow, you have to be really careful about keeping a policy and procedure and enforcing it, actually having the discipline to apply it consistently. And I know that that sounds like common sense, but I'm telling you that when you hit this point in your business, it's going to be incredibly tempting to try to basically make these little spot decisions and deviate ever so slightly and justify that deviation. But I promise you, it's going to present more risk than it does security in doing that. And what I find is this sort of bottleneck you hit at 5 million is when your growth is outpacing your infrastructure. You're growing too fast to keep up with it in building the systems and tools. And you're afraid of letting go or delegating that leadership role. That is key. And it's scaling accidentally, where you're scaling, but not because you built the pieces and did it with intention. You're scaling because scaling has become necessary to accommodate the growth that you're having that you did not necessarily produce intentionally. So like you're selling a ton, or you got good pipeline, good deal flow coming in. And because of that, you must now react by scaling, as opposed to exhibiting behaviors from day one in your business that indicate your intent to scale. This is what I'm talking about. This is basically the whole point of this podcast, is to help you, even if you're before this point, to say, hey, this is when you lay the bricks. This is when you actually go and you create those processes. You create the systems, you create the tone, the culture, the ways you want to handle things. And you make those decisions up front in a sober state, because when you end up with firefighting, you're going to end up in a state of panic, making decisions based on clouded judgment and based on specific circumstances and not your better judgment. And the other thing is, with your organization, I can't tell you this enough, how many cultures I've seen suffer because there's unclear or overlapping roles, especially in your leadership team. And there's nothing that pisses a good leader off more than feeling like they don't have actual ownership of their role and that somebody else is coming in on their territory, or that you don't trust them to do the whole thing that they've been hired to do. And then it's micromanaging, whether it's intentional or not. And it just creates a lot of confusion. I have left jobs because of this. I have left clients because of this. I have seen it, heard it, all the things. And I'm telling you, this is so common. If you are struggling with this, though, this is not a judgmental message. I'm telling you, this is so common and you are not alone. But it's so common that I made an episode about it, understand? I've seen this so many times that I'm like, you know what? I'm noticing this a lot, and I feel like we need to say this out loud, you know? So here's the thing. What's the byproduct of this, right? We're dropping the ball left and right. Stuff's falling through the cracks. Clients are unhappy. There's no standardization. There's an inconsistent employee experience, an inconsistent customer experience, poor communication, over-reliance on the founder, which is like, you know, if you're listening to this and you're in that position in your company, like that sucks, because now you're not having the experience, the freedom, the flexibility that you kind of try to sign up for by doing this whole business thing. So how the hell do we break free out of this? Okay, we've spent about 8 minutes talking about the problem. So let's talk about solutions. So we got to create some clear functional accountability.
Hey, did you know that you can actually see my face and watch this episode on YouTube? If you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you head over there and you subscribe and check out all of the guest episodes along with some of my solos. We're posting every single week on YouTube. See you there.
If you look at your business in terms of, like, I always do my groupings, right, in my financial statements of fulfillment, operations, and acquisition, which is basically your fulfillment, ops, and sales, you know, or marketing. And when I say ops, I also mean back end, legal, finance, you know, stuff like that. So if you were to even break it down into those 3 buckets, if you're a little bit smaller, but if you're not, then we're talking about sales, marketing, finance, operations, fulfillment, you know, supply chain, whatever those leaders look like in your organization, you've got to empower them and create accountability to some type of metric, to some type of result, to some type of figure that is measurable, because you need to be able to know if they are meeting expectations or not and hold them accountable to that. And that will help create a sort of reporting structure where they know what their mission is and they can go and fulfill on it. And that is so, so key. And then also redesigning your org structure to create that accountability, but then hiring in a sort of second tier, right? You've got director levels or CXO, right? So chief whatever officer. Titles are, by the way, so superficial. It doesn't matter what you call them, but let's just call it director level, where they're like in charge of the execution and oversee the team, whereas your executives are going to be accountable to the result, right? They're going to be the guiding executives in charge of that. Now, if you're too small for that, which most are, I would encourage you to have in your team a director of sales slash marketing, a director of operations, and some person in your fulfillment, whether it director of whatever. It doesn't matter what the titles are, but I'm saying somebody should be accountable to at least those three functions all the time. We have this in my organization. We have people who are accountable to those types of goals. We have goals in each of these three facets, and we talk about them on a quarterly basis and see where we're at. At a very bare minimum, you want to be doing that. And you want to make sure that people have ownership of those actual goals. And you say, I'm going to hold you accountable to meeting that, but you also have to tell me what you need for me to make that happen, right? And put them in the driver's seat of engaging you. Build systems, document SOPs for repeatable processes, make sure you have project management tools in place, and also that you're hiring for these skills. Don't be afraid to hire and say, we don't have an SOP for this yet, but as you're learning from us, we want you to interview us on our process and we want you to document this for us in your own words in a way that makes sense to you. If you put that expectation out there, I promise you, it can happen. It's not absurd to say that out loud. Also, I'm always a fan of transparency. If you don't actually have SOPs, like be honest and say this is something we're really striving for and we want to actually do this in the first 60 days with you. Now, clarifying the roles, clarifying decision making. Oh my gosh. I can't tell you how many times I've seen at clients that decision making is all still centralized with the head person in charge. And they have to ask permission of this person or approval or get that stamp every single time for every macro or micro decision. You don't want to be doing that. You want to empower people with decision making rights up to a certain point. Give them a certain amount of money to spend or a certain degree of problem. Like you can solve a 1 or 2 problem on a scale of 5. And you give examples of what's a 1, what's a 2, 3, 4, 5. And you say, you can solve a 1 or 2 problem. If it's a 4 or 5, you can come to me. And you have to train on this. You have to train on this. I swear, you have to train on this and teach people that it is so important that they understand what is relatable to you and what is something that they should be able to handle. And it's coachable, right? You have to coach on them. And I'm telling you, like, it takes time. It kind of sucks doing this. It's hard. It's part of the job. Make sure you are communicating trust with them and make sure that you're engaging them in that decision-making process so that they can learn from you and stop coming to you. And you have to make a few mindset shifts along with the delegation. The best way I can put this is stop creating processes and systems that enable you to maintain control. Create processes and systems that enable you to scale. Optimize for scale, not control. Okay? I feel like I could say that from the mountaintop 5 times. Like, scale, not control. Your goal is not to maintain control of everything. That is actually sending you away from your goal. Measure your success by how little you're doing, not how much. I literally just posted on Instagram. I was bragging about the fact that I have no effing idea how to update my website. And it's funny because, number one, I am a self-proclaimed little bit of a control freak. I like to be in control. This is a very difficult thing for me to do. It's challenging. It's something I'm actively working on, right? This is advice I'm taking myself, but it's really important to understand that I took pride in the moment where I couldn't update my website because I was like, well, it's not my job. Like, I have the ability to delegate this and I should be delegating this. I shouldn't be updating my own website. I should just be working on being super clear about my request of what I'd like updated, you know? So you have to work on giving better instructions as opposed to doing things yourself. And doing things yourself is not really a badge of honor in how much you got done. I know that might be a mindset shift you need, but you really have to focus on measuring your success by what you're not doing. And you're going to be transitioning into this long term. You have to accept the short term chaos. I promise it's worth it. You have to cut some unnecessary meetings. You have to reduce your direct reports to 3, maybe 4, 5 if you're bigger, key leaders of these areas, and let them do their thing. And that really is really where hiring comes in. You've heard me talk about hiring. This is where hiring skill is paramount. But just make sure that you are more focused on empowering your leaders to be leaders and let them do their thing. And if they're not doing a good job, well, then that's just a performance issue and a coaching issue and a skills or training issue that you need to resolve and close the gap on. So this sort of $5 million bottleneck we talk about stems a lot from the person in charge, the, owner. And I'm a firm believer that in my business anyway, I say this jokingly, not in like a self-detrimental way, but everything's my fault. Everything's my fault. Every win is because of the team. Every loss is because of me. And that's not to sound all Eeyore about it, but it's mostly to say, hey, that's when you should be listening. Whenever there's an oopsie, whenever there's a fire to put out, whenever there's a deviation from expectation, that's an opportunity for you to get in there and fix it. And I've just seen a lot of founders who go the opposite with it when they're staying close to decision making constantly. And then when things go sideways, they look for a chance to blame somebody else, or they look for a chance to say, well, that was so-and-so's job. And you never let them do it. So to break through that $5 million bottleneck, what you really got to do is just be willing to take some ownership of your role as CEO or business owner or president, founder, whatever you call yourself. Whatever you call yourself, you got to be willing to take that role, and you got to be willing to embrace it and understand that your expectation is to be the leader and enable people to do what they do. And otherwise, you're never going to break beyond that $5 million revenue point. And if you don't want to, that's perfectly okay as well. But I'll tell you, these skills and implementing some of this stuff, it'll serve you nonetheless. I promise.
As you think about growing and scaling your business, it's important to focus on how your operating costs align with your profit and personal goals. Are you allocating your resources wisely? Are your expenses supporting growth, or are they holding you back? Building a sustainable and profitable business takes intentional budgeting and regular assessments of where your money's actually going. Now, with a power session, you can get personalized strategies to help your businesses thrive. Check out the show notes for more information on power sessions and how we can work with you to create the profit plan your business needs for a successful 2025.